These woke grandmas belong in jail. Alabama embraces the nanny state. Biden's biggest climate hypocrisy yet. And is cereal racist now? All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my daily series where I take on the craziest ideas from our politics and across the internet from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around, and if you're a returning viewer, don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your thoughts as we go along. I do read the comments, and I pick a few to respond to in each episode. Now, before we get into our first serious topic of the day, I just want to take a second and note that commencement season at college campuses across the country seems to be going incredibly well. I just loved this so much. Imagine that this young woman applies for a job at your company and you Google her and this is what comes up. Let me know in the comments whether you would still hire her, please. It's just one video, but I keep seeing clip after clip after clip of wacky stuff going on at commencement season. I talked about the land acknowledgements at the one I went to for my sister. And to me, it's all just another reminder of how irredeemably consumed by woke ideology many of our colleges are. But apparently the woke Kool-Aid is in the water at the nursing home too, because we just saw some extremist grandmas pull one of the craziest woke stunts I've seen in a while. Here's a video of these two left-wing grannies trying to break the glass and damage the Magna Carta, a famed historic document, over in the UK in an attempt to do some climate change awareness protest or something.
This famous document is about the rule of
Yes,
law
can you come to...
and standing up against an
Yes,
abuse
I'm
of
receiving over.
power. Our government is
Can you
breaking
come
its
to Magna Carta,
own
please?
laws.
As a Christian,
Yes,
I
yes, sir.
am
Can you come to-
compelled to do all that I can
Can you stop doing that, please? Stop filming, please, eh?
to
Can you stop doing that?
alleviate
Stop doing
the
that.
appalling suffering that's
You come to
coming
Magna
down
Carta,
the
over,
line
please.
and is here already.
Can you stop doing
Whatever
that,
it
please?
takes,
Can
whatever
you
the
stop filming,
cost.
please? Can you stop doing that?
So we must
Stop doing that, please. Did you hear me?
just
Stop.
Yes, yes, sir. Can you come to
Oil.
Magna Carta over?
We must just
stop
stop
oil.
So I just have to say, there's something kind of hilarious about watching these two elderly women trying to break the glass and damage this document and just basically totally failing. Like if I was going to do one of these climate terrorist protests and I wanted to actually do damage, I don't think these two are the ones that I would tap up to do it. We've got more information here from what went down from the New York Post. An elderly priest and a retired teacher smashed a glass display holding an original copy of the Magna Carta in a protest over British government inaction on climate change. Reverend Dr. Sue Parfitt, 82, and Judy Bruce, 85, walked into the Treasures Gallery at the British Library in London on Friday and pounded on the display case with a hammer and chisel. A video posted online by Just Stop Oil showed. I feel like pounded might be giving them a little bit too much credit. Parfitt, who is an Anglican priest and retired psychotherapist, and Bruce then held up a sign that read, "The government is breaking the law," before gluing themselves to the display, the footage showed. The two women appeared at the library to demand the UK government commit to an emergency plan to end the extraction and burning of oil, gas, and coal by 2030. A statement released by Just Stop Oil said. The two were arrested at the scene after library security intervened, CBS News reported, citing London's Metropolitan Police. The Treasures Gallery is now closed until further notice, and these two are affiliated with Just Stop Oil, an activist group behind several acts of protest in the UK, including a 2022 incident during which demonstrators unleashed spray paint at luxury car dealerships. The activist group in question, Just Stop Oil, dropped a press release celebrating the actions of these two elderly citizens and lauding them as heroes in the fight to save the world from climate change. Of course, they never really explained how damaging a historical document, or at least attempting to do so and hilariously failing, and resulting in a closed museum for a while for viewers that would have liked to see it, actually advances that goal of reducing global carbon emissions. But that's pretty much always the case with Just Stop Oil protests, many of which actually increase carbon emissions, like when they block traffic and stop people from getting to work on time and inconvenience the public and cause cars to pile up and stall, releasing more fumes. So the two grandmas were charged with something called criminal damage and released on bail just a few hours later. Call me crazy, but I think there needs to be more extreme consequences for this type of antisocial, counterproductive, and destructive behavior. You have the right to make your voice heard, protest, raise the alarm about the issue you're concerned about, but you don't have the right to block the public from accessing things or getting where they need to go, or to damage and destroy, or at least attempt to do so, really important historical documents that all of society values. And as long as they just get away with a slap on the wrist and are released a few hours later on bail, I don't really see any significant deterrent from them pulling this kind of crap over and over and over again. So maybe I'm being harsh, but I think these woke grannies need to serve a few months in prison, honestly. And I say this all as somebody who's actually very concerned about climate change and thinks it's a real and pressing issue, not some made-up Chinese hoax like some people still somehow insist. But the solutions have to be realistic and grounded in meaningful policy changes, not in public stunts or unrealistic demands. For example, they want the UK to shut down all oil production by 2030. That would devastate their economy and cause a huge crisis while barely making a blip in the trajectory of global warming or global carbon emissions. That's not just wildly unrealistic, it's actually deeply harmful and would hurt the kind of vulnerable people they think they're advocating for. And we need to see an end to this insane style of protest embodied by Just Stop Oil and their activists, where you're publicly inconveniencing people and sabotaging the public and thinking that's somehow going to make them like your cause more rather than frickin' despise you. Seriously, I would love to meet the person out there who saw these grannies pull their little pathetic stunt and was like, wow, I need to get on board with these people. They seem really sane and normal. Maybe such person exists, but honestly, I doubt it. What do you guys think, though? Should these grannies just get a slap on the wrist, or should they be doing some hard time? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and now let's check in on Alabama, where, again, some dumb stuff is happening. So we talked about this with Florida, where Ron DeSantis and Republicans in Florida just passed a ban on lab-grown meat in the Sunshine State, the Freedom State. But apparently the Republicans who govern Alabama are going even further and threatening anybody who sells or manufactures lab-grown meat with jail time. Wired reports that Alabama has become the second U.S. state to ban the sale of cultivated meat. The bill, signed into law by Governor Kay Ivey on May 7, will make it illegal for anyone to manufacture, sell, or distribute cultivated meat in Alabama. Anyone found guilty of violating the law will have committed a Class C misdemeanor, which in Alabama carries the possibility of up to a 3-month jail sentence and a fine of $500. Earlier this May, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a similar bill banning cultivated meat in his state. U.S. Senator John Fetterman posted his support of the Florida bill on X, writing that, as some dude who would never serve that slop to my kids, I stand with our American ranchers and farmers. These two bans mean that approximately 28 million Americans now live in states that have banned cultivated meat that comes from real animal cells grown by bioreactors instead of requiring the slaughter of animals. Only 2 companies have approval to sell cultivated meat in the U.S., and it is not currently on sale in any restaurants. Alabama's government is coming in for a lot of criticism for this move, and rightfully so. The laws have been greeted with disappointment from supporters of the cultivated meat industry. These short-sighted laws, Alabama and Florida politicians are trampling on consumer choice and criminalizing agricultural innovation, says Pepin Andrew Tuma, legislative director at the Good Food Institute, a nonprofit that works to accelerate adoption of alternatives to animal protein. And that's exactly where I land with this kind of thing. As far as I'm concerned, you do not have to like lab-grown meat. You don't have to try it. It should always be labeled, and if all governments were doing was requiring that, I'd be okay with that, so that people know whether they're getting lab-grown meat or the traditional kind of meat. But the idea that, say I live in Alabama or Florida, I don't, but say that I did, and I want to try this food that's been approved as safe by the FDA, this company wants to sell me this food, who is the victim there? Who is the person being hurt that the government needs to come in and step in with criminal penalties or prohibit it in any way? Leave me alone. Get out of my grocery cart, government. Criminal law and these kinds of things should only ever be brought into force when somebody's being harmed, when there's a real victim at play. Not just because people are making choices that you personally wouldn't want to make. It is insane to me how these Republicans can, on one hand, 1 minute be talking about individual freedom and limited government and free market capitalism, and then on the next hand be pulling crap like this. Of course, it makes a lot more sense when you realize that they're being lobbied heavily by big ag donors in the traditional meat industry who want to block their competition. Because the truth is that this stuff could eventually, it's not yet, but if the technology progresses, could eventually be much cheaper than the traditional meat industry. And they're scared shitless that if a new cheap alternative that could end up being nearly indistinguishable from the original is available for consumers, that they might lose out on their massive profits. So they're lobbying the government to block their competition. But babe, that's swampy as f***. That's crony capitalism 101, corporatism. It is not free market capitalism, it is not limited government, and it's not the actions of anybody who respects individual freedom. Again, this whole debate exists independently of whether you personally want to try this meat or have any interest in it. You don't have to, in order to see that what they're doing here is wrong. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and let me know if you would try this stuff too. Originally, I was like, absolutely not. But you know, the more they ban it, the more I want to try it. Well, that's just me. That's my little contrarianness. And now let's talk about President Biden, because he just pulled yet another insanely hypocritical climate stunt. So this president has told us time and time again that he thinks climate change is like the biggest issue ever. We're facing a climate emergency.
How dare you?
And in fact, so much so that he's spent trillions of taxpayer dollars subsidizing green energy and subsidizing things like electric vehicles. But now President Biden, despite all his talk about the importance of defeating climate change, is putting huge taxes on electric vehicles. The Washington Examiner reports that the White House is set to announce new China tariffs as soon as next week, with a levy on electric vehicles and other clean energy goods. The full announcement is expected on Tuesday and will target solar goods, critical minerals, and batteries from China. The Biden administration has invested in these industries domestically. Chinese electric vehicles currently face a 25% tariff, and the administration is expected to raise that as much as 100% in order to make it more expensive to buy the product from China. The new tariffs are not expected to include traditional gasoline-powered cars that are made in China. Think about this for a second, guys. Biden is on one hand telling us that stopping climate change is the most important thing ever.
How dare you?
So much so that we have to spend trillions of dollars on corrupt subsidies to green energy here, taxpayer money, but also slapping a 100% tax on electric vehicles from overseas.
How dare you?
While not putting the tax on the gasoline-powered cars, so now you're effectively favoring the importation of gas-fueled cars.
How dare you?
It doesn't make any sense, and it's totally inconsistent with everything he said about how addressing the climate issue is his top priority. And it's just gonna hurt consumers and take away affordable options.
How dare you?
But other than that, great job, Joe. You're doing amazing, sweetie. Up next, it's time for DELULU Epidemic, my segment where I spotlight people who are letting their stupid show. Today, alpha male Andrew Tate is coming unhinged on Twitter. He recently tweeted, "Make homophobia great again," with no context. He also tweeted in all caps, "We must include the gays in everything. Baseball, more Want a bowl of cereal? Give half to a gay." Most bizarrely, he changed his Twitter bio to, "I'm not scared of jail, I'm scared of living under the rule of retards and gays." Babe, put down the crack pipe. You've had enough. It's not normal to be talking and thinking about gay people this much, Andrew. I'm just gonna be honest. It's giving repressed bottom. And I honestly can't imagine spending so much time and energy obsessing about a random group of people out there when my own life is such a hot mess. It's deeply disturbing to me that so many young men once looked to this guy for guidance and a role model for true masculinity. I know lots of straight men and they don't need to affirm their straightness and their masculinity by attacking gay people, because they're actually confident in themselves. It also just screams desperation for relevancy, honestly. He's fallen off, and he's trying to use gay bashing to get noticed again, I guess? Regardless, honestly, I really only have one message for Mr. Tate. Your DELULU is showing. Up next, it's time for Brad vs. TikTok, my segment where I react to the craziest and cringiest ideas on the Clock app. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button and comment with your thoughts as we go along. Now today, join me for another update from TikTok on how every possible thing imaginable is somehow racist and problematic, including cereal?
Good morning and welcome to the latest edition of Everything is Racist. This is not a series, but maybe it should be because everything is racist and it's really crazy. So anyway, today we're talking about Chex Mix because I came across TikTok. It was like a skit talking about Chex Mix and I was like, oh, that's funny. And then I was like, what is Chex Mix? Because you don't really think about that kind of stuff, but someone had to come up with that. And originally I was trying to figure out what like Chex meant, like C-H-E-X. So anyway, I Googled Chex Mix. So Chex Mix, we know, is like this snack mix stuff. It's like got pretzels and then like those random like cracker bits in it. Anyway, the main base ingredient we all know is Chex breakfast cereal. Like, that's where it also gets its name. So, okay, well, what is Chex breakfast cereal? Well, Chex breakfast cereal used to be known as shredded Ralston, okay? And so I was like, well, where's this Ralston coming from? Because again, I'm trying to figure out what Chex means or where it originated. So anyway, it used to be known as shredded Ralston. And it was produced and owned by this company called the Ralston Purina Company, and it was introduced in like the mid 20th century. Okay, so what is the Ralston Purina Company? So it was based in St. Louis. It doesn't exist anymore because it merged with Nestle to become the Nestle Purina Pet Care Company, or a division of Nestle to become that extension of the company. Okay, heard of Nestle Purina Pet Care Company? That's familiar. But anyway, let's go back to Ralston Purina. So Ralston Purina, that company was founded in the late 19th century by this guy, William Danforth, and it was established to basically produce animal feed. And he partnered with this guy, George Robinson, whatever. They're just making animal food. And so then they started making breakfast cereal because they got this endorsement from this guy named Webster Edgerly to market the cereal as Ralston breakfast cereal. Again, I'm like, what is this Ralston? So Ralston comes from the term Ralstonism. Okay, what is that? So Ralstonism was a social movement founded by that guy Webster Edgerly that, quote, promoted his pseudoscientific ideas of personal and racial hygiene, end quote. Yikes. So it started as the Ralston Health Club. And this health club published this guy's writings, and it was a hierarchical organization where members were ranked according to the number of degrees they had, which ranged from 0 to 100. So this just, again, sounds really bad. And Edgerly was initially publishing these ideas under a pseudonym, Everett Ralston. And Ralston apparently was an acronym that stood for regime, activity, light, strength, temperation, oxygen, and nature. So these things that like laddered back to this sort of like these ideas of personal and then thus racial hygiene. Anyway, Edgerly saw his followers as the founding members of a new race based on Caucasians and free from impurities, and he advocated for the castration of all anti-racial, aka non-Caucasian males at birth. So, conclusion, because I'm not going to go deeper into Ralstonism, is that Chex cereal exists because of this like random, crazy like white supremacist movement in the 20th century. Isn't that crazy?
Y'all, these TikTokers have way too much time on their hands. I'm just like wondering, who cares? I mean, it sounds like this ideology that he traced it back to is crazy and does sound racist, absolutely. But what does it have to do with Chex cereal in 2024 or Chex Mix or any of the products and companies as they exist today? Literally nothing. Yet he's branding this product racist in its current form because of these ancient, archaic connections that are extremely 5 layers of connection to some bad thing. What is the point of this endeavor? What is the point of finding random tiny threads you can grasp at, and if you search hard enough hundreds of years ago, find some racism or something? Literally 0 black people are adversely affected by Chex Mix in their day-to-day life in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I bet a lot of black people like it. It's a tasty cereal. And as far as I'm aware, the company is not racist. I'm sure they employ people of all races and serve all customers. Like, there's no actual issue here. You're just seeking out new layers of oppression Olympics, things to discover and be outraged over and be upset about. Maybe it's a sign of progress, honestly, that the demand for racism is now exceeding the actual supply. But it does distract from the real issues that do need to be addressed still. And even from the perspective of a woke progressive, you really wouldn't think that that's a good thing to be doing. I worry a lot about the mindset of individuals like this. It seems like they're going through life constantly seeking ways to be victims or to be oppressed, as if that is a desirable thing. And I think that's an unfortunate consequence of this online culture that socially valorizes victimhood and almost treats it like a form of social currency. We should want people being resilient and trying to overcome challenges and discrimination things, not actively trying to be as victimized as possible and framing themselves in this way. I just don't think that's a healthy or constructive mindset that's going to help you be happy or make the most out of your life. And this oversaturation of complaints about racism, it really does kind of have a boy who cried wolf effect. If you're calling everything all the way down to frickin' Chex Mix racist, well, when you actually identify a racist problem or policy, people aren't going to be as concerned or as immediately outraged over it because you've unfortunately increasingly watered down the significance of that label by throwing it around like candy on Halloween. It's not just this video or this one guy who, he seems nice enough. It's unfortunately an entire genre of TikTok content where they go through and explain minute historical stories or unknown things about how something is problematic in ways that people don't know about it. And I always wonder, if people don't know about it, that means it's having no actual impact on people's daily lives. If Chex was still somehow a racist company and was actively discriminating against black people, there would be employers or customers who are outraged and upset and raising alarm about it that we could talk about. The fact that nobody knows this arcane history several degrees removed about the company is evidence that nobody is being affected by it. So who cares? Why does it matter? When can we stop this endless parade of constant self-victimization and outrage over the most minute things? I don't know, guys. That's just my take on it. What do you think? Do you think that breakfast cereal is racist? Were you compelled by this guy's video? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button and even consider subscribing and sticking around. Now, before we wrap up today's show, I'll read a few of your comments that you left on the last episode. One person said, "Brad, you're more right-leaning than me. I enjoy your show because I like to hear alternative opinions, and I feel you do a good job. I appreciate your passion for journalism." Thank you so much, and I really take pride in the fact that people who don't agree with me can find my show interesting and entertaining still, and not grating and hard to listen to, as if, how it can be when you're listening to somebody with different views that isn't open-minded or balanced in any way. Another person said, "The worst thing is the enormous amount of resources being wasted on these meaningless events instead of actually helping people in Gaza." And this is a reference to the woke anti-Israel boycott of Starbucks, which we covered in the last episode, and I pointed out has literally no basis in reality. Starbucks doesn't fund the IDF or the Israeli government, doesn't even have stores in Israel. And I agree, there's an opportunity cost for everything in life. And all the millions of video views and all the time spent fomenting outrage against Starbucks could have been used to actually fundraise or call attention to the victims in Gaza or the hostages or the victims of October 7 or something productive. But instead, like so much of TikTok activism, it focused on absurd, silly, ridiculous, radical activism with little substance to it, instead of actually meaningfully doing something to help people or raise awareness about a real issue or anything like that. Another person said, "I just don't go to Starbucks because I don't think it's that good and pretentious." Yeah, I relate to that. And I'm not saying you need to go to Starbucks. Like, if you don't like it, I'm just saying don't boycott it for reasons that don't exist. A lot of people also commented that it's just way too expensive. And honestly, that's fair too. I'm going to read some comments from you thirsty hoes in the comments because I wore a tank top. Like, I didn't think about this when I was just just wearing it. It was just hot here, so I just wore a sleeveless shirt. But little did I know that I needed to get a water bottle for you thirsty hoes in the comments, and that you were gonna have a field day with that one. One person wrote, Brad supporting the Second Amendment by showing his guns. Another person wrote, I've seen him sleeveless. It feels forbidden. Put them away. Another person said, Jesus, Brad, this isn't OnlyFans. Another person said, Brad gave us no warning with the outfit. Oof. Another person said, yes, Brad, you can get it with that tank top. Excuse me, guys, I'll have you know that I'm a very serious journalist and commentator, and I will not be objectified. Blah, 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 blah. I'm just kidding. It's fine. I don't care. Now I'll have to second guess my outfit choices to make sure I'm not distracting the audience from the substance of what I'm saying by showing too much bare shoulder. All right, everybody, that is it for this episode. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm loving doing this show with you all, and it's doing pretty well, and it's growing, and it's just such an honor that so many people tune in on a daily basis to hear what I have to think. They want to hear me run my mouth. It's surprising, but you know what? I'll take it. Thanks again to all of you, and we'll talk again tomorrow.